that, Doc? What's going on, everybody? For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Buck Physics, and I make some of the coolest stuff in Minecraft. And today, that's going to be a trophy truck. Now, if you don't know what a trophy truck is, that's completely okay. Essentially, what it is it's a giant rally car or dune buggy sort of looking thing. It's in the shape of a ute or a truck, quote unquote, for those Americans out there. And they have some of the craziest suspension that allows them to do the biggest jumps and just land the most insane sorts of heights without taking any damage. Here's a clip of one now, so you get a bit of an idea of what they're like. Now, isn't that just absolutely awesome? Now, I know what you're thinking. That's ambitious. That is going to be very difficult to make. And you're right. So the first thing to do is to start working on the suspension on the front end. Now, here's an image of what it looks like. And it may look very complicated, but I assure you it's a lot simpler than it looks. This type of suspension is called a double wishbone suspension. And the way it works is basically by having two pivot points, you can keep the movement going up and down while the wheels can stay perfectly vertical. If you had one axis locked, the wheels would be tilting in and out as they went up and down, and this is not ideal when you're doing big jumps. Now, that was a very simplified explanation, so how do we translate that into something usable in Minecraft? Well, I originally started off by making something very similar to that clip I showed you a moment ago, having the two pivots on each side so we could have that nice vertical lift up and down. But I was really struggling with the actual suspension part. Now, on the real things, they have a spring or shock in the middle of it, and in Minecraft, we're a little bit tight on space, so it was very difficult to get that to fit in. As you can see, I was having some issues with it not wanting to go straight up and down, and it was wanting to sort of push and twist out the side. I had tried all sorts of things, including using swivel bearings, different pneumatic rods, just a bit of everything to try and get this to work as realistically as possible. As you can see, not all of my attempts were working very well. But you know me by now, I eventually got a prototype for the front suspension working, and this is what it looked like. It's a little bit clunky and blocky, but it does get the job done, and it allows us to keep moving forward and refining it more. And that's exactly what I did until I got it to this point, where I considered it good enough to move on to the rear. Now, the rear suspension in a trophy truck works quite differently to the front suspension. It is a lot more similar to the suspension that I had in my rock crawler. If you haven't checked out that video, by the way, go check it out. It is an amazing video, and I am super proud of that thing. It is absolutely awesome to drive around. But in terms of the suspension, this is what the rear suspension looks like on a trophy truck. So now that you know what it looks like, let's get to working on that in Minecraft. Now, as you can see from my first attempt, it wasn't the most stable, and I did end up adding some extra supports. It did technically make it more like the double wishbone suspension on the front, but it is still pretty similar to what the actual trophy trucks use. And here's how I did that. Now, as you can see, the rear suspension is working a lot more like we would expect. It looks a lot more like the actual trophy trucks, but the front suspension was still acting a little bit weird and splaying out to the side. So I went ahead and I fixed that up, and then I moved on to putting in the actual engine, steering, and all of the controls to make this car actually usable. Okay, so now that the trophy truck is more or less functioning, I can really see how soft the suspension is. It didn't look so bad when I was just dropping it from some heights, but once you're actually moving and with the extra weight of the engine and steering components, it needed to be a bit better. So I got back to working on that and I improved it more. Do you see what I do? I'm not sure if you noticed there, but in that last clip I showed, the rear wheels are way closer together than the front wheels are. I'm not sure how I missed this. And I didn't notice it for a little bit longer, so you'll just have to bear with the wonky wheelbase of this thing for a little bit more. But other than that, it was starting to come together really well, and it was working quite well. It looked about right, none of the suspension was acting weird, and I was pretty happy with it so far. I did also decide to put some bigger wheels on after this. If you've seen actual trophy trucks, you know they have these huge wheels with these massive tires, and that helps with some of the jumps and bumps and absorption that they need to do on a regular basis. It was also at this point where I finally realized the rear had a shorter wheelbase than the front, so I got to fixing that immediately. It was pretty straightforward. I just added a extra chain drive and then the original suspension blocks again, and that was enough to widen it. After that, it was looking really good, and I was about ready to give it some proper testing. I decided to take the truck over some of my testing area that I used for the rock crawler, and it handled it very well for the most part. There was one issue that I wasn't fully aware of yet, and I'll explain that a little bit further into the video, but other than that, it was working really good. The last thing I did at this point was start making it all-wheel drive, add the reverse gear, and I also extended the length of the car a little bit because it looked a little bit short and stubby. By this point, it was by far the best design I had come up with so far. It was looking perfect, functioning perfect, and I was ready to try and put this into a real world. So I made a schematic of it, imported it, and then I jumped into a world where I used the Terralith world generation mod, just so it had a bit more variety in length, because the default worlds can vary quite a bit up and down, and that's not exactly the kind of terrain that this car is built for. I also want to quickly address the schematics. Now, I know a lot of you have been asking for the schematics of the vehicles I've been making in these videos, and I would love to provide them. Unfortunately, for some reason with the schematics, it seems to delete a bunch of the pneumatic rods or axles, any of those sorts of things from the transmissions and linkages mod. Half of them don't spawn in with the schematics, and also the same thing happens with stuff like the springs from Create Aeronautics, so that's why I haven't been adding the schematics in these videos for you guys, and I do apologize for that. I've heard the author of the mods have been working on that and trying to fix up that problem, but as of right now, it is still an issue, and unfortunately, it's just not something that is I'm not super confident in those sorts of things. So I really do apologize for that. But getting back to the video, the truck was doing really well on the terrain, and I decided to make it look a little bit nicer, make it look a little bit more like a real trophy truck. And to do this, I kept it pretty simple. I tried to really utilize the copycat blocks because I think you can do some really cool stuff with them. And other than that, the general color sort of theme I went for was the white with the red stripes. I really didn't try to make it complicated. I wanted to keep it as simple as possible, and I think it turned out pretty good in the end. And I think it really captured that trophy truck sort of look or style without being overly Minecrafty. But if you think you could have done better or think you could do something a bit differently, I'd love to hear what you suggest in the comments. I'm open to listening to anything that you guys say. And you guys have come up with some of the best ideas that I've ever seen in some of the other videos that I've made, which is kind of crazy. Some of it is really, really cool. So we're starting to approach the end of the video and the end of the build. I think it's looking really cool at this point, but as you can see while I'm driving around, you may or not be able to see it a little bit, but this is the issue I was talking about earlier. With these big wheels, the hitbox doesn't seem to be quite right, and they're phasing through the ground a lot. Now this is causing an issue where if I'm trying to drive up a block, it just hits it and the whole thing stops and it's not acting as it should be. The wheel is a lot smaller than it actually looks, or something just isn't being calculated right. Now I'm not sure if this is an issue with the mod, or maybe I have a different mod that's causing this issue, but I really hope that maybe there's something else that could be done in the future to fix this, because I think this could be a really cool car to drive around in, or maybe even build in a survival world. But as of right now, it's basically just for looks. It can function sometimes, but half the time the wheels are just phasing through the ground and it makes it a bit unusable, which is really disappointing. So if you guys know anything that could fix this, I would really love to hear that. Or if you have any ideas or any other mods that add wheels like this, I would absolutely be interested in hearing about that as well, because Create Aeronautics is really good with what it has, but it only has like 2 or 3 wheels. So other than that, I hope you guys have been enjoying the video. If you have, make sure you like and subscribe, and let me know anything else you want to see in the future. Other than that, guys, thank you all for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.